Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lalo Dagach podcast. First, I want to introduce my co-host for today, who is Yasmine Mohammed. Yasmine is an ex-Muslim. She currently finished her first book called Confessions of an Ex-Muslim, which will be publishing pretty soon from what I understand. And you will also be able to hear more from her because she will appear on a new podcast with Ali Rizvi, Faisal Al-Mutar, and I think some other people. It's a full ex-Muslim crowd. It's called Secular Jihadists. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. The third guy that's with me is Armin Navabi from Atheist Republic.
So, and also, if you want to hear more from her in the future, which I'm sure after hearing this you might want to, I'll also, hopefully in the future, have an interview with her one-on-one and to hear her background story because it's very interesting. Again, check out her site. I believe it's on Tumblr, which is Confessions of an Ex-Muslim. And I wanted Yasmine to help me do this interview because we'll be talking with an ex-Muslim from Saudi Arabia. And although I have, I think, a fair amount of knowledge about Islam, but my knowledge about Islam is all based in what I read or investigate or what I can get from having conversations with others. But myself, I wasn't brought up Muslim or even religious in any sense. So to me, I think Yasmine can be a big help in trying to, she might ask questions that never would occur to me to ask, having lived a very similar situation. And so to introduce our guest today is Ghada. And Ghada was born in the eastern province of Saudi Arabia to a devout Shia Muslim family. And she left Islam when she was in college while she was studying chemical engineering in the US from 2010 to 2011. And she finally left Saudi Arabia for good about 2 years ago. And I'll let any more introduction be done by Ghada. Hello, Ghada.
Hello.
So is there anything else you want to add to that?
I guess the only thing I can add is I grew up a minority within Saudi Arabia. I was treated differently because of that. And then as I grew older, I became a minority within a minority living in Saudi Arabia, which was quite a challenge.
In a minority within a minority, is that like Shia and being a woman, or which is the other one?
Being ex-Muslim and living there.
Okay.
So if they didn't want to kill you before, they really want to kill you now.
The funny thing is that I have met ex-Muslims in Saudi Arabia that were ex-Sunni Muslims, and they still have the like they think that they are better than me because they're Sunni or ex-Sunni, and it's I know.
Oh my God.
They leave Islam, but the whole like, better than everybody attitude still stays with them, and of course the misogyny stays with them too.
Yeah.
And this is among the ex-Muslim community, you find?
Yes, that's among the ex-Muslim atheist community in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, it takes a while to cleanse yourself of all that garbage.
It really does.
Right, because you leave the religion, but you don't necessarily leave a lot of prejudice behind with it.
Because you're socialized with all of these things all wrapped together, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard this from another friend of mine who's been on the show before, Jennifer Sutton, who was a convert to Islam. But before that, she was brought up Mormon. And she said that, the Mormon church, there was a lot of racism and discrimination. So she said even like today, she no longer considers herself racist and has clear the ideas against racism, but she'll still find herself suddenly holding a racist thought, when confronted with something, and she has to like kind of remind herself not to. So it's kind of like that, right? It's like you still kind of are programmed since you had it since you were young. You still kind of hold on to some of those ideas.
Yeah. You know what's interesting is, although Majid Nawaz is still Muslim, I was reading in his book Radical when he was talking about leaving Hezb ut-Tahrir, which are the terrorist group, and he was saying that when he left them, he had to rebuild himself from the inside out, kind of brick by brick. And Ghada, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was pretty much my experience leaving Islam as well. Like you have to rebuild yourself, and every step you have to think about, like, okay, so I'm not this anymore. What am I? Like, what do I put in place of what used to be there? Was that your experience too, Ghada?
It was, and it led to a deep depression for a number of years. It was very hard to get out of as well. You, especially that in that year, I wanted to experience everything that I could experience before going back to Saudi Arabia, and it was I just wanted to try alcohol, wanted to go out. I wanted to just say all the blasphemous things that were in my head. And I also wanted to find out, what's my goal in life? And that was the hardest part, is figuring out who you are and why you are here.
Yeah, because we had a path before, right? We had exactly like, this is what you do every single minute of the day for this purpose. And now all of a sudden that's gone.
Especially for Shia, they have a certain goal that they are working all their lives, putting all of this effort. So when the Mahdi comes, they just go out there and help him because he's coming back to save humanity.
That's the belief in the 12th Imam that will come again and bring it's kind of the apocalypse story for Islam, isn't it?
Yep, it is. But for Shia, they take it quite literally.
Right. It's more prevalent prayer in Shia than Sunni Islam.
Yes, because in Shia Islam, they believe the Mahdi is alive. He's just hidden. He is waiting for the right time to come out. And the right time to them, it differs who you ask. But it's usually a time
when all the
where
Jews are out of Israel.
Well, not really, because he's supposed to come at the same time as the Messiah, as Jesus, but he has to wait until there's so much injustice and so much darkness in the world that we need him to come and save us.
Do you mind if we talk a little about you growing up in Saudi Arabia? Because for a lot of people, it's just you kind of hear, well, women can't drive, and that's outside of that, people don't know too much about it. So can you kind of describe your family upbringing and the atmosphere and how it would be different growing up in Saudi Arabia in the Shia community versus Sunni?
Growing up in Saudi Arabia really depends on who your family is. My family was not considered to be liberal, but they were not conservative either. They were somewhere in the middle. They were very religious, very devout, loyal Shia Muslims. They observed all the celebrations that the Shia do, including the Muharram for Ashura. They celebrate all the births and the deaths of all of the Imams and the Prophet. They go on pilgrimages, not just to Mecca and Medina, but they go to Mashhad and Qom in Iran, and they go to Karbala and Najaf in Iraq, and they also used to go to Syria before the war to visit the shrine of Zainab. They're very devout from that side, and of course, it comes with just how they were. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought there. Let me backtrack a little.
So you're just talking about being raised as a woman in Saudi Arabia depends on what your family situation is like.
Yes. So my family, as I said, was not considered to be very liberal, but they were liberal in a very conservative tone. And I mean that by they didn't practice segregation.
Maybe I should just interject for a moment here and clarify that, or maybe you can clarify that liberal in Saudi Arabia is very different than liberal in Canada or liberal in Chile different. Or something. Yeah.
I would say, I don't even know what the right word for liberal would be. Like,
yeah.
Well, to me, if
more
like
to me,
as a what it would open-minded imply, like as far as like gay rights or women's rights and
Oh,
things
no
like
gay
that.
Oh
rights.
gosh, no,
No,
no.
no, no gay rights. Like even the
Yeah.
most, and this is, you will find this a lot, like in Saudi liberal societies, they're all homophobic. None of them are for gay rights. Like they would be all for women's rights, all for a democratic system, but not gay rights. Okay, let's backtrack again. So the way I would explain liberal in the Saudi sense, it would be that they would allow women to make a choice whether they want to veil or not. Education is open and nobody's forced to marry. And that's, to me, at least from what I have observed, that is a liberal family in Saudi Arabia. My family, of course, was not like that.
Can I ask you, so those are the characteristics that would make them liberal. What would be the characteristics of a liberal family that would still be conservative in the Western sense?
It would be in the Western sense.
Like
That's
for
the most
example,
liberal that I can think of in Saudi Arabia, honestly. Like, is mainly it all revolves around the women. It doesn't even revolve around the men at all. If you look at a family and you see their women not veiling, that's a liberal family. If in the family the women are all covered up from head to toe, even the youngest ones, that's a conservative family.
That's your signal.
That's a signal, yes. And it also opens or closes doors for marriages. My family was, I mean, if you still want me to talk about that, my family was considered more liberal than some because they didn't practice segregation as other families did. So
and they allowed you to work too, right?
And they allowed me to work and they allowed me to study as well.
When you say segregation, you mean segregation of men and women, right?
Yes, that's what I meant. Like, my earliest memories, I have always been around my male cousins. Our get-togethers always had both the men and the women together. Of course, the women were covered up from head to toe, and usually after a certain point, they would go their separate ways, and then the men would be together and the women would be together, but it wasn't practiced. It wasn't like you can't talk to your male cousin or you can't talk to your female cousin. It was completely normal. Like I grew up and my best friend was my male cousin. And we talked on the phone regularly and he would come to visit me regularly. And it wasn't something that was frowned upon or they never thought something wrong of it because we were considered more open-minded from that sense. But unfortunately, we were still very religious and very conservative. I was forced to wear the veil when I was 9 years old, as did all of my female cousins.
And how are Shia families treated by the Sunni majority?
It really depends on how much money they have.
Well, that's typical.
It really is. Like, my family, for example, we have two factions. We have the rich, connected faction that sells the big robes that the Saudis wear. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, like a thobe.
Not the thobe, the robes that they put on top of them.
Right. Mm-hmm.
The black,
the fancy ones.
The fancy ones. Yeah, my family. I have a faction of my family that manufactures them and sells them, and they sell them to the royal family and the ministers and the like. And it's been the family business for a long, long time. They are well connected and they have a lot of other businesses and they're pretty rich, so they're treated pretty well. And then there's the rest of us. We're not treated as well. And it's the same thing wherever you go. The bigger families that have big businesses and are rich and well connected, they're treated with no discrimination. They get jobs, they get promotions, they get houses, they get loans, they get everything. And then the ones that aren't well connected and aren't from the bigger families, unfortunately, don't get that same treatment.
So money aside, if between, like, because I'm sure that like there's the discrimination there by class status, but if you're kind of like just lower middle class or middle class Shia versus Sunni, what kind of discrimination might you face? Like, can you still study in university? Can you get, the same jobs that a Sunni can get?
It really, really depends. If it's two middle class people, one Shia, one Sunni, it depends highly on the person that is hiring or the person that is on the committee that is approving for university.
So you wouldn't say there's like institutional bigotry
There,
against
there used to be.
Shia? Mm.
There used to be, before I graduated university, yes. It was institutionalized. It was like my aunt, for example, when she graduated, she wanted to go into med school. She was rejected, even though her counterparts that were Sunni, that were at the same level, were accepted.
Yeah.
Mainly for the sole reason that they were Sunni, she was Shia. It really heavily depends on the person that is hiring, and there is no ethics committee that would
Mm-hmm.
go and be like, no, no, there's no affirmative action, nothing like that.
Mm-hmm.
If all else equal, they would definitely go with the Sunni than the Shia. The other
So,
systematic, one more
yeah.
thing that I have to mention, the other systematic discrimination that does occur in Saudi Arabia against Shia is that Shia are not allowed to serve on the National Guard because they are Shia.
Because they can't be trusted?
Yes, they are considered enemies of the
Wow.
state. They also cannot serve on high authority in the army for the same reason. They can
Wow.
join the army, but to a certain rank, and then they can't go above that.
Of course, people are not ever openly atheist, are they?
Oh, no, no, nobody is open atheist.
Right.
The only person I know that is open atheist is the son of a diplomat in Saudi Arabia.
Oh, and he openly says
Mhm.
he's an atheist?
Yes, he's open. He openly says he's an atheist, and he openly says he's gay.
Wow. And he lives in Saudi Arabia,
Yes, he does. He lives with his family. His
but he
dad is a
knows he's
diplomat.
protected.
Yeah.
Mm.
There's one.
No one.
There's one. There's one
There's
atheist
one
in
gay
Saudi.
atheist.
In Saudi Arabia. There's the one guy.
Everybody knows him. Oh yeah, Bob.
Well, he doesn't go around telling everybody he meets, but I mean, his friends, when I met him for the first time, he told me he was a gay atheist. He didn't know that I was an atheist. He just told me that.
Oh wow.
He tells people that he meets that are religious at this as well. He's told his parents. He's told his brothers that were his brothers. I worked with one of his brothers. He looked like he could join ISIS.
Oh dear.
And that brother knows that his brother is gay and an atheist.
Can I ask you the like day-to-day life that you like now that you live in the United States and you see how kind of daily life goes about versus Saudi? What would you say are like major differences that might shock people? From what I understand, like for example, there are no movie theaters in Saudi Arabia.
No movie theaters. Everything, every day is honestly a struggle of how am I going to get from point A to point B?
Yeah.
Every morning, especially even though we had a driver, I still had to figure out who's going to take me to work that day, who's going to pick me up at the end of the day. If I want to go to the supermarket, who's going to take me? And how long can I stay before my mother wants the driver? I swear, it's the same thing if I want to go shopping. Of course, I have to get permission from my family to go shopping because even though it's my money, I have to ask them permission to use it. If I wanted to go see friends, I would have to come up with an elaborate story of who I'm going to meet, where I'm going to meet them, how long I'm going to stay, and what we are going to do. It was extremely nerve-wracking and very stressful that I just stayed home. I would much rather not do any of that. I saved a lot of money because of that, which helped me escape. But
Well, there's not much else to do anyway. I mean, I lived in Qatar for about 7 years, and literally there's like home or the mall
yes, pretty much the same in Saudi. It's either home or the
or
mall.
work or work.
And
Yeah, that's it.
I much preferred to go to work, even though my job was soul sucking.
And at this time, are you wearing a baya?
Yep, gotta wear the abaya and gotta wear the hijab as well.
but not necessarily in niqab.
No, my mother was as horrible as she was and as religious as she was, the niqab was the one thing that she drew the line at. She would not wear it.
Huh. And the Matawa wouldn't come after you guys?
They
Oh,
would
that's
sometimes, usually her, not me.
because you're young still?
No, mainly because I don't think they think I'm Saudi.
Oh, right. That's right. Because they only pick on Saudis.
Yes,
If
they
you look
do.
foreign, they leave you alone. They're like, okay, whatever.
Is this because they have to try to make the effort to kind of be more tolerant towards foreigners because they want to sell themselves as kind of a touristy place?
No, not really. It's because they believe that the best way to describe it is they feel like they have a duty towards Saudi women to make them more pious and better.
Yeah. Saudi women should know better.
Is it Saudi women or Muslim women in general that they have a
Muslim
feeling?
women.
Muslim women, but Saudi women more specifically.
Okay.
Like somebody was telling us the story of how he went with his girlfriend to a hotel in Egypt, and they were showing their passports. And these are ex-Muslim friends of ours. And in the passport, she had a hijab on. So the people at the front desk knew that she was Muslim. And so then they started bothering them. They went up to the room and they were like, show us your marriage certificate. Why are you in this hotel room together? Yada, yada. Meanwhile, I've stayed in countless hotels around the Middle East and nobody's ever given me any trouble because I don't have a hijab on in my photo and I have a Canadian passport. So they don't know that I was Muslim. So they just leave me alone. But if they get any hint of it, they'll expect that you follow the rules.
And in that treatment, how are men treated differently from women?
Like in Saudi Arabia,
Yes, in Saudi Arabia.
they're given so much more freedom.
From the minute
They've
they're born, like it's from the get-go.
like the boys can go out till late hours of the night. Nobody would ask them, nobody would call them. If I would go over to my best friend's house, which was 5 minutes away by car, lives in the same neighborhood, my parents know her parents, all of that, and I stay there until 10 o'clock, I would be getting phone call after phone call. Where are you? Why are you not home yet? My brother, on the other hand, would go half an hour away, stay with his friends. No, no, not even one call.
And the constant ayib all the time. Don't sit like that, you're a girl. Don't laugh so loud, you're a girl. Lower your voice, you're a girl. It's just constantly, as a girl, you've got all of these restrictions around you 24/7
Wow,
that boys, right?
what you just said, like brought so much PTSD right now.
Yeah,
Me
yeah,
remembering the things that my mother would be like, don't sit like that. Sit
mm-hmm,
straight up. Don't walk like that. Why
yeah,
are you walking like that? Stand better, stand taller.
yeah.
Don't talk
And,
like that. Don't laugh like that.
and this is from childhood. This isn't like teenager or adulthood. This is like
No,
as a
this is
little
like nine,
girl.
10 years old, you'd be told this. And of course the big one, who's gonna marry you if you
Yes.
do this? Who's
Who's
gonna
gonna want
marry
to
still
marry you?
want you?
Yeah. Yep. I heard that one all the time
And
too.
it's not just from the mother, it's from every single woman in the family that will tell you this. My grandmother, my aunts, my older cousins, my uncles' wives, same thing.
I think that's an important point that when people discuss misogyny or patriarchy in the Middle East or among Muslims, I think people make a mistake of mistaking patriarchy or sexism just being from the man to the woman. And the first time I started making I think I had this prejudice as well until I read Ayaan Hirsi Ali's first book, Infidel, and when she started talking about how so much of the misogyny and the sense of purity, the sense of attack, that you're constantly on edge about how you're acting because other women might either in your family or cousins or something like that might call you out or tell on you and try to keep you pious and pure. So do you also see that a lot in Saudi Arabia, that you see like a lot of the misogyny or patriarchy comes from the females as well?
It comes mainly from the females. When I wanted to study abroad, my mother was completely against it, kept saying things like, I can't let my only daughter go abroad and study. What will people say about us? It was my dad that, after lots of convincing, convinced her to let me go if I were to find a sponsor to study abroad. She made fun of me because I wanted to be a chemical engineer. She said that it was a man's job. What was I going to be, a plumber? What do I want to be, a car mechanic? Because I wanted to be an engineer.
So she just had no understanding of what an engineer is.
No, absolutely none. She said, what, you want to work in a plant with other men? She just didn't like the idea that I liked things that she considered more manly. She didn't like that I didn't like makeup, or that I didn't dress up in the way that she does, or that I didn't like shopping, because she was a huge shopping addict. She didn't understand why I didn't like gold, because every Saudi woman should love gold. It wasn't just that. It was how, like, my father never mentioned marriage up until my mother started mentioning it. And at 25 years old, I was called a spinster.
Yeah.
How?
Like, that word it's not even used here, except for, like, you'll read it in old books. But in Saudi Arabia, it's still like a commonly used word, and in Egypt, and then all over the Muslim world.
Wait, the actual word spinster?
Spinster,
like, I mean,
yes.
the translation of it, but yeah.
Spinster.
Like, it's still something. And I mean, at 21, you could be a spinster, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Yeah. In my family, women, the girls get married right after high school. They're engaged when they're in middle school, and then they get married right after high school.
Otherwise, what's wrong with you?
And
why didn't anybody want to marry you?
And that is something that has been troubling my mother when I was there, is that
it's embarrassing.
We will get into it. When I graduated high school and I finally was able to leave, of course, there's a story behind how I was able to study abroad. During my senior year in high school, I applied to universities in the United States because I was so excited that I thought my father was on board and I was going to go study engineering and my dream was going to come true. I'm finally going to leave the country. And then I got accepted in Boston University. I was so excited. And then the bomb falls. My parents tell me that there is no way that they would ever let me go and study abroad because I'm a girl. And it hurt a lot to hear that, especially that I was very excited and I did all the work. I paid all of the application fees. I took the SATs. I did everything that I could. I got all my letters of recommendation, translated all my transcripts, and then still I got accepted in a really good university too. And they said no.
How old are you at this point?
I was 17. When I got accepted. It was my senior year in high school. And so what I did, I stopped talking. I went on a hunger strike.
Oh.
And I remember I made my mother go all the way to Bahrain, even though I knew that the procedure to apply for the university in Bahrain was online and not in person. I made her go all the way there at 6 a.m., knowing fully well that she will not be able to come back until 6 p.m. that day. So she was missing a whole day of work, and she was going to spend it with me, the person that tricked her into going, only to find out in the first 5 minutes when we entered the university that, oh, but it's very evident that you have to do it online through the website. And I think it was at that point that my mother realized that there's no winning with me. And coupled with me not eating and losing a lot of weight, and she was seeing that I was losing weight, that she finally came over and said, if you find a sponsor, you can go and study abroad. Of course, I had missed the deadline for Boston University, but I found a sponsor. A year later, I was out and I studied abroad, and I won. And I graduated and I became a chemical engineer.
Good for
Can
you.
can women at any age just travel
No,
by without the permission of, I think, a male guardian, right?
the male guardian has to give permission at any age for the
Even
woman to.
even if your mother wanted to go abroad, correct?
Oh, she has to have her husband's permission.
Right. Which I think is an important point, because that's the part where I think a person in the West doesn't really get it. It's like, well, you could wait until you're college age, buy a plane ticket, and just
No,
pick up and leave. But it doesn't work like that.
Mm.
it doesn't work like that. Like this, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Wajiha al-Huwaidar. She's a Saudi female activist. Um, she's very unliked in Saudi because she's very unapologetic in the way she talks. I really like her. She's actually a family friend. I've never met her in person, but she's very outspoken and she has attempted multiple times to leave the country without a male guardian. She would go to Bahrain with a driver or something, and they would always return her back because she doesn't have male permission. And she, until recently, I think now she's not allowed to leave the country. There's a ban that prohibits her from leaving because of her activism.
Wow, that's her activism.
And her activism was trying to leave the country without a guardian.
So, Ghada, can I ask you, how do you feel when? Because this happens to me, but I don't think it has that much weight when it happens to me versus a person like you. What happens to me is you talk about Islam and the suffering of certain people and the lack of human rights, and you bring up Saudi Arabia. And while it's true that Saudi Arabia is not representative of every Muslim country, and there's some Muslim countries such as Iran where also human rights are at a very low level, but it's a completely different kind of Islam. But you'll bring up a country like that, and some Muslim apologists will take an attitude like as if that doesn't count. That's just Saudi Arabia.
It's
Well,
just a few million people, that's all.
that's just what Saudi Arabia has a population of 21 million. Let's say half
Hmm.
of that are women. You're just shitting on all of those women that have absolutely no say in their lives. No say. When just to get an education, not even to work, just to get an education after high school, these girls have to beg their fathers to sign a piece of paper. And even that doesn't guarantee that they will be able to go to school because they still need transportation. If they don't have transportation, they drop out of college.
And as soon as they piss off their dad can say, that's it, no more school for you.
Pulls them out. As easy as that. He can do the same thing for work. If
Hmm.
he can do the same thing for marriage. Girls don't have the right to marry whoever they want. And this is a story that really resonates with me because I know the person. She had a lot of potential. She was very smart. She wanted to be a doctor. Her parents wouldn't let her because then that means that she would be mixing with the opposite gender. And this is a liberalish family. I'm not going to say liberal, but they have women that veil and women that don't veil in their families. And she's a well-traveled girl. Both of her parents are well educated. Yet her family, when she wanted to be a doctor, said no, because that would mean that the people that she might not get married because she would be in a field that was not segregated. That really hurt because I saw how she really wanted to be a doctor and it was shot down because of something so stupid as a potential mate. And her family was not very open about who she could marry. She could only marry from certain families. The first guy that she tried out turned out to be a complete and total monster. And I was really glad that she dropped him instead of going with it, even though her parents were pressuring her into accepting. And she lucked out in the end. But her story is unlike any other story. She lucked out that her second try was actually a normal human being from a liberal family that allowed her to continue her studies, and she ended up getting a master's degree. after she got married, her husband was way, way more liberal and way more understanding than her own parents because her parents just wanted her to get married. That was
It's
their
just a
goal.
gamble, right? It's hit or miss. Like you never know. It all depends on your guardian. It all depends on your owner if he's going to be a good person or not.
That's that's the struggle of a Saudi woman. It really is a hit or miss. Will your father let you study? Will your father let you work? Will your father marry you off to the highest bidder? You don't know.
Yeah. I
I
remember that about
was
my students. I was just going to say, my students in Qatar were the same thing. They were, even though they were studying, and after they finished studying, they were going to get jobs. And so it seemed like they were of the lucky women in the country. There was this constant threat above their heads that they could never step out of line because they didn't want to miss out on the opportunity of continuing their education. So
there
it's
were
not
so many
like freedom doesn't even
rules.
really mean freedom either. Like there is no such thing as actual freedom. It's just it's just very like it's a spectrum of prison, really.
There's so many rules, so many rules. It's unbelievable. And sometimes, like my father used to always threaten whenever I did something wrong that he would pull me out of work.
Yeah.
And it was the last threat that really made me buy the ticket and come to the US.
Can I ask you, when he says pull you out of work, how could he do that? Does he not let you leave the house, or can he actually like influence where you work to tell him like, she can't come to your work anymore? Like how does that?
He
Both.
can he can just go to the employment office and say, I resent my permission for my daughter to work. I don't want her to work anymore. I don't give her permission. And because it's Saudi Arabia, they have to comply with the guardian.
And then he tells the driver, "Don't let Ghada out of the house."
No, he just doesn't let me out of the house. He doesn't have to
Don't.
tell the driver anything.
Right. So even when women work, the women who do work, they are working under the permission of someone, either their father or their husband or something like
Hmm.
that.
Yes, it's a condition of the work. Yeah, it's the same thing with education. When I got accepted for a scholarship, my father had signed that saying that he gives me permission to study. And when I got a job, my father had to sign that he gives me permission to work. And it actually says that if the legal guardian decides at any point that he does not want his daughter, wife, whatever, not to work, he has the right to pull her out.
So also, aside from what I was asking you about, like the point of view of Saudi Arabia, I've also had a lot of contentious encounters with a lot of the Islam apologists who are Western based. I had a few encounters with Dalia Mugahed, who wears a
Oh dear.
hijab and was on the Daily Show with Trevor Noah, and she's a big advocate of not just the hijab, but that the hijab in general is very rarely forced on women. I have my serious doubts of what the percentages she believes globally, and I would even add of even women who wear any kind of veil, whether it be the hijab or niqab in Western societies, even the U.S., the percentage of when she says not forced and just chosen, to what degree the parents that really have putting no obligation at any age for them to wear it. But she was on like the Daily Show, and she says, most women are not forced to wear it. It's just a choice. She's speaking for all Muslim women at this point, and she says all it does is privatize sexuality, as it's a good thing. And Trevor Noah kind of applauds that. He's like, "Oh yes, because women
Mm.
should be able to do that and privatize their sexuality, so we don't judge them based on their looks." And he got a big applause from that, and so did she. And when you see that, I mean, because I mean, again, I'm not talking or debating her from the point of view of a Muslim or a Muslim woman or anybody who has been in that position, but I try to get I try to at least empathize with the point of view of people like you. But how do you feel about that? Because, and also maybe Yasmine as well, because you both have worn veil at some point.
That
Hmm.
really pisses me off. It pisses me
Hmm.
off whenever somebody says that the veil is a choice. It is never a choice. Even when like the likes of Dalia Mujahid says that, oh, it's a choice. I chose to wear it. Why? Why did you choose to wear it? Because your God told you that you have to wear it. It's your duty to God to wear it. It was not a choice. And it's not a choice for the millions of women that live in the Middle East. It's not a choice for girls like me when we were 9 years old and had to wear it. It was never a choice for me. It's never a choice for my cousins. It wasn't a choice for my mother. It wasn't a choice for any single woman that I know personally. So when she says that it's suddenly a minority that forces women to veil, I just want to go and punch her in the face, because that is not true. And she is
lying. Knows it. She knows she's lying.
Like, and she is not helping. She's not helping at all. All these women that are forced to wear. So what? How many more women have to go out there and tell her that she's lying? That, like, it's just, I can't even. I'm sorry. Like, this is really pisses me off, because for every single story of, hey, it's my choice, you go visit the ex-Muslim subreddit and see like 10 stories of girls, I can't do this anymore. I hate wearing the hijab. I only do it for my family. And this is here in the West, not in Saudi Arabia or Iran. It's in the West.
This argument of choice too, like, I find it curious that no other women choose to wear the hijab except for Muslim women. Like, if this was something that people would just choose, like, oh, I choose to wear a pink dress, or I choose to wear a bandana, you'll find that across the world. But nobody else is saying, I choose to wear a hijab. It's not coming from nowhere. It's coming from the pressure from your family. I was 9 years old, just like Ghada, and you get told a good girl to go to heaven and for Allah to love her and to protect her because we love her so much, because she's like a piece of candy, a piece of meat, a jewel. Lots of different objects can be used now in this story, but basically we want to protect you, so we're going to wrap you up and make sure that you're protected so that you can be perfect when your husband goes to unwrap you when he's ready to fuck you, basically. That's the idea behind the hijab. That's what you're being told constantly by society. When you put the hijab on, everybody goes crazy around you. Oh, mashallah, you look so beautiful. Oh, look at your face is glowing. Oh, blah, 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 blah. They don't do that for girls that don't wear hijab. I've had people say to me, it was weird because I was not even wearing hijab at this time. But I had a student say to me in Qatar, oh, teacher, you can't trust her. She doesn't even wear hijab. And I'm like, listen, bitch, look at the person you're talking to. Like, I'm not wearing hijab either. But I knew that was a part of the society because I grew up with that. When a woman wears hijab, you can trust her. She's a pious, good person. And if she doesn't, she's all the opposite things of that. So it's not really a choice, is it?
It isn't a choice either when you know that you won't get married if you don't wear it, when people will look at you differently, when your family wants to kick you out if you don't want to wear it. It's
when men on the street will bother you even more because they're going to think like, oh, well, you're asking for it. You're the one who's not covering yourself up. So obviously you want us to comment on you.
And it's just not, it's the whole idea of choice is given free will. But we're not getting that. Not in Islam. Not when God tells you you have to wear it. Mm-hmm. Not when it's an obligation in your religion to cover up. It's not a choice. That I don't understand how they can say that it's a choice.
Can I tell you my perception of what's wrong with it? And you guys both can correct me or tell me if I'm on point. But the issue I have when I hear Dalia or Linda Sarsour and what's that other girl from Muslim chick or something like that talk about these issues about the hijab, and they say, well, it's just a choice. There's a certain element there that I think they glaze over when they say, well, this is just my connection to my religion or Allah. But that connection was established when the parents from a very young age telling you that you have to wear this because it's part of the religion, because Allah tells you should wear it, because hiding your parts of your body is for sexual reasons, that you shouldn't reveal it, and if you do, it's negative, it makes you a slut or a spinster, as you guys were saying before. Yep. And when you're pushed and pushed and pushed these ideas into your head your whole life, and then I can understand how some of these women later will say, well, no, it's my choice. But that choice is based on that indoctrination. Now, when they say it's a choice, it's not completely untrue, right? They are choosing to do that, but it's not. What worries me is that the liberal audience that is like watching The Daily Show and Trevor Noah and Dalia Mugahed, they're only hearing the word choice, and they're not imagining all the background and upbringing that comes from the parents about how it's, it's almost like basically slut shaming a woman to wear it. And I've had people tell me, and these women will say it as well, is that, well, it's just a veil over your head. It's like wearing a scarf, or nuns do it, or et cetera, et cetera. And to this, I've given the example that, like, Mormon women have to wear long skirts. Now, is wearing a long skirt bad thing? Am I against long skirts? Of course not. But also with the long skirts for Mormon girls, it's something that they're pressured to a horrible sexist degree that they must wear. It's not an option for them not to wear it, right? And even the ones who might say, I choose to wear it, well, yes, but this comes with a huge cultural pressure that you were brought up into to wear it. And it seems that that's clear. If I mention Mormons to a lot of Westerns, they get that, but then they forget completely about it when we're talking about Muslim women. So what do you guys think is this fascination from the new liberal community to defend the hijab and applaud Trevor Noah for saying, oh yes, it privatizes sexuality and it keeps the male gaze away, and you got liberal audience who are not Muslim, don't wear the hijab, and applauding this woman, applauding Trevor Noah for it. Like, aside from the Muslim women who say it's a choice, like, how else do you feel about that? And am I on point pretty much, or am I just talking out my ass?
Well, from my perspective, I think you're totally on point, and I don't even like to get into it. Like, I wouldn't get into it with Dalia because I know that she's a straight up liar. I wouldn't get into it with Linda or the Muslim girl chick. I wouldn't try to. What I would say is, okay, that's great. That was your experience. That's fine. It's a choice for you. But for the millions of women that are living in Saudi Arabia, or that are living in Iran, or that are living in lots of other Muslim countries, it's not a choice for them. So for you to be in a language that they'll understand now, for you to be all privileged in your Western world talking about it being a choice, well, you don't have any religious police going around with a whip, whipping your ankles for showing or whatever. So let's just focus on that then. And let's just ignore these people that are insisting that it's a choice. Fine, it's a choice. Let's let it go. Because it is Stockholm Syndrome. I know what that feels like. I was brainwashed too, and nobody would have been able to get through to me. So I don't even bother trying to get through to them.
And also there's an element of dishonesty where I don't think if you ask them questions or if you put arguments against them, I don't think they're going to respond with honesty.
You're absolutely correct, because they know the truth. Like when Linda Sarsour posted that thing about women in Saudi Arabia, there's more women in Saudi Arabia that were in government than they were in the US, or something stupid like that. I can't remember what it was. She's not that dumb. Like, she knows when she tweets that, or when she tweets something about Sharia law being good for women, like, she knows that she's being dishonest. But most of the people that follow her are the people that you were describing that are clapping in Noah's audience, and they're people that don't understand. They don't know enough about the religion, or they don't know enough about the culture, or they don't understand enough about the topic that we're talking about. So for them, it's just like, oh, yay, happy lies. Yay, it's a choice. Everything's okay. Don't worry about it. Because it's just easier than having to deal with unhappy truths, right? Because then it's messy and it's yucky, and nobody wants to talk about that. Let's talk about positive things. Women, feminist Muslims, and Mohammed was the first feminist, and before him, women were nothing, and now look at them, so empowered. Okay, that's great. Everybody just wants to you know, to be happy.
Honestly, I think it's more about them trying to spread Islam, or that they have this idea of Islam in their head, that they're so delusioned that this is the right path. They believe that because they were privileged enough to wear hijab, that they were able to choose all of this for themselves, that this should be the reality for everybody else, and that if everybody joins Islam, my version of Islam, of course, not Saudi Arabia's or ISIS's or somebody else's extreme fundamentalist version of Islam. No, my version of Islam. If they join it, then the world will be so much better. Yes, it will be so much more peaceful. All the women will be covered up. Rape will be non-existent. I really think, honestly, maybe they are lying, but I think the other part is that they really do believe that this is the truth, or at least that that's what they want to promote is the truth, and so they can get more Muslims on their side and they stop being a minority. Or maybe they feel like they're so different because of this so-called choice that they made of veiling. I honestly wouldn't, I don't know. All I want them to do is stop lying or stop saying that it's a choice, because it isn't.
I think it's cool to be oppressed these days. I think it's cool to be part of a minority, and it makes you, like everybody was celebrating the woman in the Olympics that was wearing hijab. There were other Muslim women in the Olympics as well, but they weren't wearing hijab, so they weren't being celebrated.
But isn't that so backwards that the hijab is basically an instrument that is forced on women for the most part in the world? There are some parts of the world where it's passed by law, and even if it's not passed by law, which I think is a bad metric, right? Because a lot of people say, well, it's legal in this country, it's illegal in that country, it's not forced by the government. But even then, it's like, even in the United States, sometimes you wear the hijab because your parents force you to. It's not about just the legality. So considering that it's for the most part forced on women, isn't it bizarre that, for example, like Hillary Clinton will tweet about how progressive it is that we see a woman in a hijab, and when it should be completely the opposite? Shouldn't the feminist liberal point of view take a picture of the woman who's not in hijab and say, oh, isn't this progressive? Isn't this great? What does this come from? That we're celebrating an instrument of oppression.
We even have the hijabi on Playboy and celebrate her.
I was just about to say that. This is a conversation I've had with my boyfriend for such a long time now. It just doesn't make sense to me why anybody would want to promote such a conservative ideology. I mean, these are liberals, supposedly. They're against everything that the right wing is against, yet they promote an ideology that is very much right wing, that oppresses women, that oppresses homosexuals, that wants to end freedoms, yet they promote it as if it's this amazing, new, great thing that we should all accept. The only thing I can think of is that they just want more voters. I can't think of any other reason as to why they would do this.
I think they just don't get that it's right wing. Like you just said, it is right wing, but they don't see it that way. They see him as left wing because it's oppressed, or it's not oppressed necessarily, but it is a minority group. So it has to be protected. And they don't see it as, yes, it's a minority group, but it's a right-wing minority group. Does that make sense?
So do you see it like this, that so if you see Islam like in a country like Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan or Qatar, you see the religious misogyny there, which it will have so many characteristics like the religious conservative right wing of the US. But what people know in the US, the liberal people, the people on the left, all they know is their right wing, right? They know the Christian evangelical right wing. And all they know about Islam is that it's disliked by their right wing.
Yes.
So they're like, I dislike this right wing. I dislike the George Bushes, the Trumps. I dislike the evangelical, Sarah Palin's or Michelle Bachmann's. But they see that those people hate Muslims. And so their reaction is that this is my natural ally. And to remain an ally implies that they have to see past the same characteristics that they dislike from their right wing. Do you think it's that?
I totally think it's that. And I think that's why you had these people that, like, when that BBC clip came out about the women housewives of ISIS, and why people were saying, "Oh my God, this is so offensive. Like, oh my God, I can't believe my money is going towards BBC, like yada yada," because they're not recognizing that there are right wing Muslims. ISIS are basically, like, they're far worse than they're just like the alt-right in America. That's your alt-right Muslims. Like, but they don't see them as the same. It's just hate. There's one hates because of skin color and the other hates because of religion. But they're exactly the same. Whether you're an Islamic supremacist or a white supremacist, you're on the same side of the coin. You're on the hateful side. And I think that's what a lot of progressives and liberal people don't get. They don't understand that.
To go back a little to your upbringing, when you went to the United States to study chemical engineering, were you an atheist yet? At what point did you lose your religion?
I think I lost my religion. It was a more of a gradual thing. My first semester in university, I did my best to adhere to all of the rules. I wore the hijab because my father came with me the first few months, and I thought it would be like I thought I would turn, if I took my hijab off, I would turn my back against everything that they brought me up with. Then my second semester, I realized I really don't like wearing it. I don't want to wear it. I want to feel wind in my hair. So I took it off. Slowly, I started eating non-halal food. And then as time progressed, I just started becoming more liberal in my thinking. And I believe it was around 2010 that I realized that I really don't believe in this religion. I'm doing all of these practices, the praying, the fasting, the observing of whatever events that the Shia do. I do it just because my family made me do this, but I myself don't believe in it. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And by the time I would like to say my senior year in college, I completely let go of any type of religion, became an atheist. And that's when the depression started, and I wanted to figure out who I was and what my path was in life. Started reading more, and I think what really made me leave the religion was actually something so little. It wasn't even a big event that happened that made me suddenly just declare, you know what, I don't believe in this. I'm going to stop doing it. It was just a night where I took off my hijab, went to a party for that the students in my university set together, had a few drinks, and just had a genuine good time without pretending to be somebody that I am not. It was that I woke up the next day and I realized that's what I want to be. I want to be myself. Mm-hmm. I don't want to lie to myself anymore. I want to be myself when I am with myself. And it was a great liberating feeling, but it was also like a start of a whole different type of chapter in my life where I had to figure out myself.
And what point did you decide? Because you went back to Saudi Arabia after college, right?
Yes, I did.
So at what point did you decide, like, I need to go back to the U.S.?
It was right after a series of events happened. So I was at first diagnosed. I was first diagnosed with a type of carcinoma on my face that I had to do a surgery on. Right after that, I had to break up with a guy that I was at that time really in love with, and I thought that this was going to be it. But I had to break up with him. My job didn't go so well, and I lost my best friend. Um, all of that in the span of less than a month. After all of those happened, one after the other, he realized that I really had nothing left in Saudi. I I was there was nothing left for me there. I had to find something else to do. Like at first, the reason I wanted to stay was I wanted to build up my resume and I wanted to stay for my friends and I thought, I could see this relationship through, but no, none of that worked. Everything that I was working for just crumbled. And at that point, I realized I had nothing to lose. If I left now, I could start over again and it would be fine. It took it took a few tries, but I finally did it after I met somebody here in the US that agreed to house me for the first few months when I came, and I booked my flight and came. It was those events that came together as a cluster that really made me realize I had nothing left in Saudi and I just wanted to leave.
So you booked your flight and came, but you had already had your dad's permission to travel then?
Yes.
Because
It was
if it were that
it
easy,
was
a lot of women would leave, I guess.
if it was that easy, yes, a lot of women would leave. A lot of women have contacted me asking me how I did it. And to be honest, the only answer I have is that my father had already renewed my passport a couple of weeks before, and I think he did it at the same time. And I was going away for a work trip, and he gave me the permission because my family was okay with me traveling as long as I was watched, as long as somebody was watching me. If I go with work, then my boss was watching me. If I'm going with a cousin or an aunt or an uncle, they were watching me. So they would feel better as long as I was watched. And you know what the funny thing is? When I went on my work trip with my coworkers and my boss bought me drinks. I got drunk with my boss.
Yeah.
So when you,
So when you were talking about, sorry, go ahead.
I
Lalo.
just wanted to ask because to clarify, so you were able to leave because your father had renewed your passport for a work trip. But
Yes.
so did you go on that work trip
And
and
approved
just kind of,
for exit visa.
and so you went on the work
Yes.
trip and you just kind of like, slipped away, or how did that work?
No, I had to go back. I wasn't 100% sure that I wanted to do it. Like I made the decision that I was going to leave in March, and this was in December when I went on the work trip. But when I went back to Saudi, I got into a huge fight with my parents. I was so scared that they were going to find out I was an atheist that I just booked my flight and left. They found out I was an atheist afterwards, for sure.
How is your relationship with them now, or after you left?
Um, it's non-existent. My When I left, I had got a lot of hate emails, a lot of threats, mainly from my mother. She said a lot of horrible things. I think when I was when I was writing up my application for asylum, I asked one of the girls on the XMNA page. She's a translator, I think, to translate a few words in Arabic to English for me. And one of them was like traitor, whore. Uh, I forgot what else, what it was. Some other words. I mean, I honestly can't really say them because I don't know the translation to them in English. But they're mainly curses and derogatory terms, me being a woman. And at first she thought, I was like, did the man say that to you? No, it was my mother. My mother was she knew how to choose her words. She knew how to hurt me. She knew my best friend was very close to me and that his death really hit close to home. And so the first thing that she says, I wish that you died instead of him. I wish that you were dead instead of bringing up all the shame to me. Her emails mellowed out over time, and now she just sends me Islamic propaganda and saying things like, I wish I still had my daughter. My daughter has abandoned me. Even though I reply to all of her emails saying, I want you back in my life, but she completely ignores them because she wants me back in her life as a Muslim girl, not as her daughter, the way she is.
So
My
it's very
father,
conditional love.
very conditional. And of course, I mean, she's done so much worse than just those emails. She's spread rumors that I tried to kill her.
Oh my God.
Yeah, she's spread a lot of rumors about me, all sorts of them. Um, she's sent a lot of threats and a lot of hate emails to me. My dad was more of a slut shamer. He called me a cheap whore, that I opened my legs to everybody. He says that I know that you're not really faithful to this man that you're with now. I know you have a bunch on the side as well.
What the fuck?
Yeah. He's an Arab man. What do you expect? He never apologized for anything that he said. He just wants me to talk to him and tell him everything about my life, even though he's said a lot of things that are pretty unforgivable, honestly. And he still wants me to talk to him and tell him about my life and include him. So if I introduce him to my boyfriend, he's not going to go and scream at me call me a cheap whore again? Of course he will. I know he will.
It's so confusing. Like it's this weird emotional mind fuck.
Well, my family has been ostracized by the community after I left. The reason that they're acting the way they do is because they're lonely. Me leaving has caused them to become, rejects. Everybody makes fun of them. They tell my dad that he's a horrible father because he didn't control his loose daughter. Look at your loose daughter going out, not wearing her hijab, bad mouthing the Prophet and the Imams in the internet. And ever since that article, it wasn't even an article, it was a broadcast message that was sent to the community about me being an atheist from the conservative town that I am from, and how people would never dare do this before because the penalty for apostasy is death. I've completely stopped tweeting, stopped writing things with my name. I just wanted to live a normal life where nobody was coming after me because I wrote something bad about Islam or about the Prophet or about one of the Imams or whatever it is.
This really hits home with why so many people are still closeted ex-Muslims, because they just don't want to have to deal with this, basically a bomb, not just on them, like you get all the blowback, but it's on your whole family.
And I understand that, whatever. I mean, I thought about before that, and my family has disowned me, so the family can let them back in. And they take this whole disowning thing seriously, too, that they met a colleague of mine in an airport once upon a time, and they didn't even mention that I was their daughter. They just mentioned that I was a girl they knew.
Oh.
And this was in the U.S. to a colleague of mine that doesn't even know anything about Saudi Arabia or my story. She just knows, when she told me the story, it's like, I saw these old people in the airport, and they mentioned that they knew you. So when I asked them how they knew you, they just said that you were just a girl that they knew. Like, even to a complete stranger, they didn't mention that I was their daughter. They really take this whole disowning thing seriously.
But then they're also emailing you saying, I lost my daughter.
Yeah.
So they're just, it's like they're being forced to disown you because of all they're being ostracized in the community, but they don't actually want to. Is that fair?
At least, maybe not my father, but my mother for sure, she doesn't want me if I'm not Muslim. My father has shown a little bit of remorse, a little bit, not too much. He is still, as he says in his emails to me, he is still an Arab man. He still has Arab man honor. and he cannot let his daughter do whatever she wishes because that goes against his nature as an Arab man. But he understands why I don't want to be Muslim anymore. My mother is the complete opposite. She just wants me to be Muslim. She doesn't care what I do as long as I identify as Muslim. So I can, in the end, go to heaven.
To ask you about that specifically, about the religious issue, that kind of ties back to you know the kind of sexism your mother spews and pushes on you, and there's other elements as well that you'll see a lot of apologists such as Reza Aslan will point out any kind of oppression, sexism, fundamentalism. You'll say these are actually cultural issues specific to the region you're talking about, not to do with Islam. Or even if we do talk about Islam, people will say, well, this is just Wahhabism, and they'll almost talk about it as if it was a completely different religion, almost like we're not talking about Islam anymore. So how do you react, or what do you think about when people kind of disconnect these your experience, the problems you have with your parents and your mother, and people say, well, these are for cultural issues, or it's not really about Islam, it's about more of an extreme form, that's just Wahhabism or Salafism. How do you do you think there's any truth in that? Or
there's a little bit of truth in that. I would have to admit that. Like, you would see in the more liberal areas of the Middle East that this isn't as big of an issue, but even in the mildest forms, virginity is looked at as the most important thing for a woman. It's still there.
Like, Ghada grew up. She grew up Shia, I grew up Sunni, she grew up in Saudi Arabia, I grew up in Canada, but we have so much in common. And the same can be said for women that I've spoken to from around the world. So Islam is the common thread. And I think Sarah Hayder also has a really great quote on this too, which I can't remember verbatim, but it's something like that. It's like, well, if none of this has to do with Islam, then why is it the common thread between all of these women's stories? So yeah, it's to different degrees. Of course, like Ghada was saying, depends on your family and how liberal they are. But even so, the most liberal of Muslims is going to be more conservative than the most conservative of Americans, for example. Like, it's not, when we say liberal in that world, it's very different than, what people think of when they think of the word liberal. But yeah, it's all to varying degrees, of course, because we're all different people.
There was, or has been, numerous documentaries in which somebody from the West would go to Saudi Arabia and interview a bunch of privileged women, and they would all say that they like their life the way it is, that they don't want to drive because they have their drivers, that they feel that they're privileged because in here they have drivers, they have somebody taking care of them all the time. They don't have to do what the Western women do, like in America, where she has to work, where she has to go take her kids to school. She has to do everything for herself and for her husband. It's just too much work. And she feels so privileged to be in Saudi where she's not expected to do any of that. And I call bullshit, because I honestly enjoy this struggle. I'm not going to say enjoy, it's a struggle. It really is, but
it's freedom.
It's freedom. It's being able to right now go out the door, not having to tell anybody where I was going. It's knowing that the money that I have earned is mine, all mine. Nobody has the right to come and take it from me. I don't have to go pay a driver every single morning to take me to work and then every single afternoon to come and get me back. I don't have to worry about a curfew or who I talk to or what I eat or how I sit or anything like that. It's just a normal person's struggle every day.
It's like when I hear that argument that you talked about now, Lalo, it makes me think of somebody saying like, oh my gosh, it's so great to be in a wheelchair. Somebody pushes me around all the time. I never have to walk. never have to go upstairs. Like that's exactly what it sounds like. Or no, sorry, it was actually you, Ghada. You were talking about the women in the
Yes.
documentaries. Like that's how ridiculous it sounds to me when somebody is happy that they are imprisoned or that they are being handicapped, really.
I honestly think it's mental illness that I wasn't able to do this. It's an unfortunate thing, really. I really wish that I have said that so many times that if I did tell myself that, maybe I would still be there, probably married to my cousin, probably pregnant with my third or fourth kid. But at the same time, I'm so glad that I didn't do that. I am so glad that I thought it was all bullshit and I just continued on with my life. And it made me extremely unhappy, but at least it got me out. Though I did tell myself, though, I did, for a very brief period of time, I told myself, maybe I'll find a good husband. Maybe he won't be so bad, like, he won't be like my parents. Maybe he'll allow me to do the things that I want to do.
But isn't that such a sad expectation for your life, isn't it?
It is a sad.
To think that my life might be better if I just find the right man to let me be happy. I don't. Women deserve so much more than that.
Yeah, but in Saudi, that's pretty much what every girl aspires to be, is to find a husband that would allow her to live her life, would be a good husband that would give her all of these freedoms. It's very unfortunate, but it's the reality of so many Saudi girls.
Was there anything you wanted to add, Gada, before we finish up?
Let me see that paper. Maybe I forgot
I
something.
have a question.
Go ahead.
I wanted to ask you, because this is something that I've heard about before, but I've never met anybody who's actually had experience with this intricate underground world in Saudi Arabia where all of the seedy troublemakers like the atheists and the gay people.
Okay.
Like, tell me about it.
It's actually something I did want to talk about. And
Awesome.
I'm sorry I didn't talk about that. So I didn't know about this underground kind of lifestyle until after I graduated and went back to college and went back to Saudi. And at first it sounded like it's so far-fetched. How do people get alcohol? How do people do all of that? How do people date in Saudi? And then I had a friend that I've known since high school who introduced me to his other friend that he thought he was setting me up with. That didn't work. But that friend introduced me to the guy that ended up being my boyfriend at the time when I was in Saudi. And that guy was a DJ. And he was also like the point of contact for drugs and alcohol in at least his group of friends. And he introduced me to a whole set of friends that threw parties inside the compounds in like the private compounds inside. Of course, all these happen either in private compounds or in private homes in Saudi or in Bahrain if they could. But my first experience was in Saudi, inside these compounds, and it's kind of like a secret handshake of some sort. Like you don't know for sure if this person is into that lifestyle until you talk to them and you start to feel them out. And I don't know what the exact like. I don't know what it's like. I don't know. So it's not like you don't go and like tip the person in the bank and that takes you back to a whole big party. No, it's just got to know the right person. And to me, it was the guy that I was dating at the time was the right person. For another person, it could be, their drug dealer or their alcohol dealer. It could be their boss, their coworker.
I love how the drug dealer and alcohol dealer come in the same breath.
Well, yeah, because it's under the same bureau in Saudi. It's both punishable by death.
Holy cow.
Yeah. The underground party is mainly inside the compounds, and it's all about who you know And if
So
you know the right person,
you get in.
you get in.
And when you say the compounds, are these like the American compounds?
The American compounds,
Like
British
Aramco?
compounds. Yeah, Aramco, for example. The American consulate also throws parties, and that's actually one of the better ways to meet these people is outside the country. Like if you go to Bahrain, you go to, certain clubs or certain restaurants, and you like see who is there, get a feel, and then when you go back to Saudi, you go look for these people and get to know them, and then slowly get invited to these parties.
And so when you walk into that party, is everybody dressed like, is it like party atmosphere? Like, do you take off your hijab and niqab or
hijab,
your abaya?
everything. Yeah, it's a party. It's a real party
It's
with
like a real
actual
party.
with alcohol, with drugs, with everything.
So it's just like a club, but in somebody's home, or?
Yes, it's usually in somebody's home. Yeah.
Do you think they party even harder than maybe you might find in the US because of the
Oh,
restrictions?
yes.
Yeah,
And speaking from a girl that partied both in Saudi Arabia and outside of Saudi Arabia, way harder. Way
yeah,
harder.
even for expats. Even when I was an expat in Qatar, I drank so much all the time.
I don't even drink here.
Yeah.
and I have easy access to it, and it's super cheap. In Saudi Arabia, you like pay $200 for a cheap bottle of whiskey.
Also, we were obsessed with pork products. We'd eat like ham wrapped in bacon just because. But when I'm here, I'm like, whatever, I prefer vegetarian food. Like it's just what you're not allowed to have all of a sudden is just really, you really want it when you're there.
I still want to work here. Like I go out of my way to buy the bacon and buy the sausage for the reason that it's bacon or sausage, no other reason.
I got the image in my head of like a possible like TV show called like Saudi Women Gone Wild, and it's just like I'm imagining like a party of like in these compounds, and they're just like in one hand there's whiskey, and another hand there's just like ham wrapped in bacon. It's just like it's a very different idea of what going wild is. It's like eating bacon, right? It's just like, oh my god! It's just like it's kind of like when you like Girls Gone Wild when they lift up their shirts, but here's like a picture of somebody eating bacon.
Her ankles.
It's like, yeah, you see her ankles and her wrists. And it's like, oh my god.
You know what's actually funny that when I was going through the underground, like it was a great release to have that. It was extremely difficult to hide from my parents, but it was still a great relief to have an underground life where, people were just having a good time. Nobody talked about anybody. All we did was, drink and smoke hash and party. And on occasion, if people were open to it, would have sex. Very, very rarely, though. Girls were still, wanted to be pure and wanted to wait until marriage. So, of course, they went the back door.
Oh, yeah. Tell us about that, because I remember learning about that when I was in Qatar, and I was fascinated.
That's God's loophole, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm still pure. I'm still waiting for my husband to open me up, but you can still use the back door. It's
So this is
totally
used among Muslim women as well, the whole God's loophole thing, right? Huh.
Yep, the God's loophole.
Is that a Catholic thing, Lalo?
No, well, actually, I think it's like an evangelical thing, but there's like a comedy group that made it like a whole music video about it, Garfunkel and Oates. And it's about like Christian girls using, having anal sex to get around still being virgins when they're married. And the song is called God's Loophole. That's the first time I had heard.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I heard that guys do that too. Like they're still like, oh no.
But they do it. Yeah.
What was that?
They're straight, but they still go.
Yeah. Like I'm not gay. My boyfriend is, kind of attitude.
Yep. Yeah. As long as he's the one doing it and not the one being done to, he's okay. He's totally okay. But the other thing that I was going to talk about, when I was going through that kind of life, I really wanted to write a book about it, like a Saudi Girls Gone Wild, bunch of stories. But I don't know if it would.
So I'd
It
buy
was
it.
just
I'd read that.
fascinating. Yeah,
Yeah.
you should still write it because just the juxtaposition between your normal everyday life and then how this is like so completely the opposite, but still super tame compared to what we would consider going wild over in the West.
like, I was thinking of writing it from the point of view of like both boys and girls at the same, and like the virgin girl that just wants to have fun, and the virgin girl that found the God's loophole, and the I don't know. It was a project in my head for a long time that never saw the daylight.
Yeah, I think there's a certain it becomes more interesting when in a world that's everything is to the extreme, that
Yeah.
when you're just so repressed and you can't do anything, exactly what happens. And that's why I was almost pretty sure that when I asked you about if Saudi parties are crazier than what you even see in the West, I could just imagine like, the wanting to let loose, right, nature of it. And I think there's an interesting thing there if in the sense of a story that you might work into a book of like, the describing the repressed nature of day-to-day life and how it just explodes when you just find these parties and compounds.
Yeah, I've seen like a married woman with kids come to one of these parties, and she was completely wasted in the first hour, just
Yeah.
dancing and she's like, I have two kids back at home. I just want to let loose. My husband doesn't even love me. And it was true. His husband doesn't really like her. She was forced to marry when she was 19. She was 27 and she already had 3 kids.
Jesus.
Now, wouldn't she ever be afraid that it would get back to him because she could get in a lot of trouble, right?
I think at that point in her life, she really didn't care. She really just was so, she felt, it's,
You reach a breaking point,
just,
right? Where you're
she
just
reached,
like,
she reached that breaking point. She really did.
So would that ever happen? Would people ever tell on each other? Like were there
No,
okay.
at least not in the secret underground society. Nobody tells anybody anything. They would cover for, like, I had my friends covered for me so many times. Like, if it weren't for them, my parents would have probably like, locked me up somewhere in a basement and never let me out. But we all know how our parents are. We all know how our lives are. We all had each other's backs, both the guys and the girls, and the guys. And I've mentioned the other underground society, the Saudi atheists, or the Saudi ex-Muslims. They were still misogynistic and still had all of that like thoughts in their heads. But the other part, the guys, at least the ones that I knew that I partied with, we had a sort of a secret or an untold or unspoken agreement that they would take care of me no matter what happens, that they would not take advantage of, of
So
the
you
girls
totally
that
trusted
they
them.
were.
You weren't
And I
worried about
did.
anybody dropping anything in your drink or anything
Nope.
like that.
And if anything, they were, at least that group, they were completely very protective. Like they would watch what the other guys were doing. If they saw that girl was getting a little too drunk, they would take her aside and put her like in a car, stay with her until
Oh.
the end, drive her. I have had the guys drive me back home like at 3, 4 a.m. because I was afraid that my parents would find out that I was not home. They would leave the party just to drive me back home. And they would like stop, and this has happened, like they would stop the music, everybody stays quiet if a girl's phone rings and her parents are on the
Oh,
phone.
wow.
Yeah,
the whole party just
they
shuts
were
down just for a phone
the
call.
whole party. Yeah, and if anybody is drunk and screaming, they would like take him out so the girl can take the call. It was like they were very. I trusted them completely with my heart.
Do you think what happens is that because people get so wild at the parties and it's an explosion of liberation, that it's also easy for guys who show up to take advantage of the women, and if they do, well then these parties aren't really going to work and it's not going to continue to happen.
Yeah,
Right. Women will stop
yes,
coming.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's
yeah.
like if
And
that happens like to 3 women at one party, like the woman's like, I'm not showing up at these things anymore, and then the whole thing's conceptually
Yeah.
is ruined. So they have to be like, okay, we're doing this, but we also can't let it transform into some kind of, take advantage of women kind of events. If not, this is not fun anymore for anyone.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's mainly it. So no hookups really happen. It's mainly just having fun and getting and letting loose. The hookups happen, but very, very, very rarely. And not because the guy comes over and tries to like get a girl to come back home with him. If that happens, the guy gets kicked out of the party and becomes like excommunicated and never invited over to any other party again.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
See, it's interesting because you say it's like so crazy, but at the same time, it's very tame.
It's super tame. This sounds like a party I want to go to.
Yeah, it's very important because in Saudi, it's all about appearances. So if a girl's reputation goes down the drain, it's on all of these guys, and they don't want that to happen. They still care about us as their friends. So, and they want these parties to be fun. They don't want, the girls to be like, oh, what if I go there and then everybody knows about my reputation, then my reputation is ruined, then I never get married, and I never get this, and I never get that. So it's pretty controlled. It's a controlled environment, but it's also a let loose environment. I have smoked more hash in my life in Saudi Arabia than I have ever outside.
So when you say drugs, that's what you're basically talking about, smoking.
Yeah,
hashish.
but there's also like my gay atheist friend, he gets all sorts of other drugs, but he's hardcore drug addict. So,
but that isn't
it's
too
not
typical
common.
No, the more typical one is hashish. Everybody smokes hashish in Saudi.
Mm-hmm.
Even the religious people do. I had a
Yeah.
guy who was an ISIS sympathizer, and he smoked hashish.
Yeah.
He also knew I was an atheist and didn't care.
But he was an ISIS supporter?
He was an ISIS supporter, yeah. And he knew my then boyfriend and always asked him to go to prayer. And my ex was an ex-Muslim. Oh, and he's in the US now. Anyway,
just drop that in there.
yeah. Anyway.
Well, is there anything else you wanted to add, Ghada, before we?
No, that's all. I just talked about the parties. They were pretty amazing.
That's really interesting. Actually, I would never occurred to me to even ask about the parties. I'm glad it was brought up. I mean, I learned a lot. Thank you so much, Ghada, for your time.
You're very welcome.
It sounds like you're not too big on social media, so there's nothing you want people to follow you on or anything.
No, I'm not big.
All right.
I mean, yeah.
Well, Yasmine's social media account for Twitter will be in the description, and mine as well. And thank you also, Yasmine, for co-hosting with me.
Thank you for inviting me to co-host. This was awesome. I really enjoyed this conversation. I learned a lot.
Yeah, as did I. Well, thank you, guys.